Introduced to my mother through a mutual friend in 1965, Theo was soon a regular guest at the family home, reciprocating with lavish teas at his cottage. With my mother, he shared a Russian and teaching background. With my father, a Charterhouse education, love of classical music, and relish for puns, and with both a love of gardening. Theo's hillside garden, with an array of shrubs planted by Theo, was a feature of the Godalming landscape. Theo's influence saw my parents put me down for Westminster. It could have been awkward with a family friend on the staff. Theo's tact meant it never was. He kept an avuncular but distant eye on me in my early years. Later, he steered, not pushed, me into classics. In the holidays, we sometimes caught the same bus. Years later, Theo waxed lyrical about the charm of the old Guildford bus station, lamenting its more functional but soulless replacement. He had an acute sense of place and atmosphere. The Surrey countryside and Charterhouse gave him a particular frisson. After our parents separated, Theo was a rock. For my mother, he offered a kind of retail therapy, as she, Theo, Peter Fenimore and I roamed the drunk shops of rural Surrey in summer holidays. My mother doing the driving, Theo the talking. Theo had an uncanny ability to enter a shop and make a beeline for the only bargain in it, often, of course, an old book. At dinners, he preferred small gatherings. When the 2 to 3 other guests mentioned by my mother turned out to be half a dozen, Theo would moan with typical hyperbole about access to the table being blocked by phalanxes of chaps. Conversations with my mother could be a trial of will. Theo, you're not listening, she'd say. Actually, Theo was both sociable, taking keen interest in other guests, and a good listener. Of course, he was foremost a great talker, making his loss of speech in late life all the harder. He gave good advice too. It was Theo's wise counsel that my mother sought in an unusual situation for a reluctant Soviet emigre wondering if she should return home. Less seriously, to my more misplaced attempts at classroom humour, he would enjoin, first think very carefully what you're going to say, then decide not to say it. Happily, Theo remained in touch with my father too, without offending my mother. Some thought him otherworldly, but Theo's deep understanding of human nature enabled him to see that life is untidy and good people can grow apart. After my accident, though not seeking to sugar the pill, he had shrewd things to say about the relatively lesser suffering of physical affliction compared to mental illness, and on the need to avoid dwelling on the past. He helped us in all sorts of practical ways, whether finding Latin coaching for my sister or teaching work for me after my accident. In return, though neither saw friendship as reciprocity, Theo would consult my mother in late-night phone conversations on obscure parts of Russian grammar. Theo had unusual sensitivity, as Michael noted, and that extended especially to animals. It upset him, for example, that pets could be neutered, and a fate incident that befell our own cat Tiger. And when Tiger made an unprovoked assault on Grubby, it was the animal lover in Theo that enabled him to forgive Tiger. Just. Roman comedy and P.G. Wodehouse aside, Theo liked the gentle humour of Laurel and Hardy and the two Ronnies. I think he found Monty Python a bit cruel, but did chuckle at my renderings of their public school sketches, notably the sex lesson given in the style of a strict Edwardian pedagogue. And with Theo, you were safe. Your puns were greeted not with a groan, but a roar of hearty laughter. And he could laugh at himself too, mimicking ex-pupils advising boys still at school. Oh, don't take any notice of old Theo. The excellent Telegraph obituary noted turns of phrase that Theo made uniquely his own. Others included gutting of even mild physical activity, Babylonian orgy, used ironically with modest food fare, and TBW, typical British woman. I'm not sure Theo ever learned to cope with formidable upper-class ladies. Theo could surprise you. He once briefly grew a beard. Wary of dogs, he got on famously with my father's Alsatians. Loathing cricket, he would still come to watch my father and me in an annual match at Charterhouse, even in the cold. Yes, he liked the housemasters. taught some of the boys playing, and there was tea. But it was mainly friendship and loyalty that brought him. He made a deep impression, even on people who met him just once. Teachers at my mother's school, where he'd given the talk on old books, and the reluctant Soviet emigre. I recall him with great affection, as teacher, of course, but also wise counsellor, companion, and above all, family friend.